I'm introducing the next panel titled Catalyzing Growth, Leveraging Investments and Cross-Border Cooperation for Global Impact. The four gentlemen on the left are experts in their fields, so I am introducing them. Gregory Dimitriadis, the CEO of the Growthfund. Gregory, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Antony Scaramucci from New York, thank you for being here in Athens, the founding and managing partner of SkyBridge Capital, founder and chairman of SALT.
Thank you.
Paschalis, Bouchoris, head of Middle East, Atlas Capital Team, LP, thank you. And Usman, Sarfraz, a finance professional. I'm not saying other words for them, you can Google them while you're here, so we only have like 29 minutes left for this discussion. And I'll start with Gregory Dimitriadis. With the first question, what is the purpose of the new National Investment Fund to be established?
And thank you for the invitation and the whole organization. Congratulations, Joanna, for organizing this so very well. Growth Fund, which is the equivalent of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Greece, actually we aspire to become. We have several assets in our portfolio, which are companies and participations. And what we were missing was the investment arm, actually, to become a fully fledged sovereign wealth fund. And this is what we're preparing now. We're preparing it with the help of BlackRock. So it will be established according to the international best practices. And as it was announced actually yesterday at a press conference, I was with the Minister of Finance, and he actually gave the basic things that will change and evolve what Growth Fund has been. So it is first that we have state-owned enterprises which we will have more flexibilities to restructure. And these will also by themselves become some also investment opportunities. And the fund itself, which is going to start with a capital of approximately 300 million. And the idea is to act as a catalyst for further investments in Greece. It will be in fields which are important to the Greek economy, for the green transition, green infrastructure, and so on. And it will follow the best corporate governance practices, because the idea is that we create something that it's going to be in par with the best sovereign wealth fund, the best in class. And this is what will create the trust, the necessary trust for other funds to come and co-invest with this fund into the Greek economy. Mm-hmm. Effectively, that is what it will do. It will have minority participations, but it will act as a partner for foreign capital to come here in significant projects. We're going to be in cooperation with, of course, any local players, and we want to help out. We will not be in any case in any competition with them, even with Antigone and HDBI that I see there, Antigone Liberopoulou. Hi. We're in talks how this will be complementary, because at the end of the day, this is something that as the Greek economy in the whole, we have to support everybody from different angles, the vision for to actually implement Greece's prosperity that we are talking so much about.
Thank you. Antony Scaramucci, could you share your outlook on the global investment scene? Where do you see opportunities? Where do you see threats?
Well, I think I would start out by saying that U.S. interest rates are too high and they need to come down. The Fed is obviously a little bit worried about that, but I would encourage people to look at inflation data outside of the traditional government statistics. And so one very good website is something called Truflation. So it's truflation.com. And what they do is they have a decentralized data aggregation, and they give you real-time inflation. And so if you go to their website this morning, the U.S. right now is just over 2%. And that's coming down. And so the Fed's going to be dealing with the the opposite of inflation soon. They'll be in disinflationary situation. So we still think the Fed cuts 3 times this year, probably starting in September, which is very good for asset prices and will probably keep the global economy quite stable.
Okay. Paschalis, there's a lot of talk about geopolitics this day. How relevant are geopolitics to the investment outlook in Greece?
So geopolitics have been, increasingly important in investments globally, I guess. When it comes to Greece, 3 developments, all 3 negative, I guess. You have the situation in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, the unbelievable human toll and pain, of course, but also a negative development, economically speaking, in an adjacent region to Greece. You have Ukraine, which is negatively impacting Europe and Greece, among others. And you have the increasing strategic rivalry between the US and China, which is also of relevance to Greece. Let's not forget that the port of Piraeus is operated by the Chinese, and Greece and other countries in Europe have been seen as a gateway to Europe for the Chinese for a number of years. So this is the terrain. Greece has to understand and navigate the terrain. Of course, Greece is part of the European economic bloc. It's a Eurozone country. It's actually its strongest asset. Through Europe, it can mitigate some of the headwinds that it would face otherwise in an era when we're moving from multilateralism to nationalist, protectionist policies, new trade barriers, new barriers of all sorts in the transfer of capital and people. So by being part of Europe, Greece is shielded, but it can also benefit from some of this geopolitical dislocation. We're living through an era of fragmentation. The supply chains are being rewired. The fact that Greece is part of new, very interesting and promising networks, energy networks, connecting it with Europe, with Africa, with the Middle East, is very important. It's a great example of how Greece can take advantage of some of these geopolitical dislocations.
Very nice. And Usman, your outlook on Greece investment-wise, potential areas of investment and some main obstacles to facilitate them?
So just building on what my friend here just said, I think geographically, Greece is very well located. It's a gateway between other parts of Asia, Africa, and Europe. In terms of potential, I think it's huge. The tourism sector, there's a lot of potential there. Renewable energy as an investment space. There's abundant sunlight here, and renewable energy is a big theme globally. So I think there's a lot that can be done there. And we've seen and spoken about the activity in the real estate space over the course of yesterday and today. So I think there's huge potential there as well.
Gregory, coming back to you for the first time ever, the Growthfund is making a major and serious effort to register and exploit 36,000 properties, including, of course, many diamonds owned by the state. What stage is the strategic plan at, and what is the most substantial step to be taken shortly?
Yes, one of the biggest things in our portfolio is real estate. Some of the area that you see around here or on the other side of this peninsula actually belongs to one of our subsidiaries called the TAD, that has a lot of real estate projects, assets. And what we have seen is that for decades, since the Greek state was created, we didn't have a clear view of what is actually exactly the real estate portfolio that we have. So we have a lot of codes, a big list of assets, but not many details for each one of them. So we do the obvious thing, and we do it in cooperation with ETAD, which is the subsidiary. So we do it jointly. And what we do is we go to the private sector to get help. And there are 2 things. One, we are forming a project management office that will coordinate this work to identify what each code belongs to which asset and what's the value of the asset effectively. And then we have a process where we go with a framework agreement to the market, and we will attract, we believe, around 9 consortiums. Each one will get a package of 1,000 codes, assets, and they will do the work of actually finding out what each asset is. From this exercise, we expect to find several assets of value. Of course, we already know some that are emblematic and they have value, and we try to make the best out of them. But as we are finding out that there are more potential opportunities, this actually will be matured in a way to then either group together or separately have the best possible result. And when I say result, it's not just to find assets to just, go sell them, but instead how they will be better developed and they will create value, not just for today, but also for the future. It might be someone that can, investor come in, invest in this property, and because this eventually will come back to the state after some years, it will have more value. So we look at it both financially for the longer term, but also environmentally and also socially. So it is this combination that we have put out as strategy and Growthfund as a board of directors. And Stefanos, my chairman, is actually over there. So this is a big priority for us. So far, what was happening was that we were very reactive. Someone was identifying a deserted plot of land, and they were saying, who does it belong? It belongs to you. And then you go to now, by
You
knowing...
go to the church and see that it's owned by the church or somebody or some
Somebody else, yes.
local authority.
Now, the important thing is that we will know, after all this time, what is the exact properties, the exact value of the properties we have, the exact uses that these properties can have, and therefore be able to have a strategy around it. And even myself and my team, it took us 2 years to reach this point because it was very difficult and rigid. But I think this will help a lot also in terms of transparency, because it will be very clear to everybody, because this is not assets of just Growthfund, it's of everybody who is a Greek citizen, so they can be able to access and have this information and, of course, find investors.
Thank you. Antony, what kind of systemic risks are the two conflicts that take place at the doorsteps of Europe, Ukraine and Middle East, put in place on Europe and the rest of the world?
Well, let me start with the Middle East for a second. I think ultimately, if the hostages are not returned, I think it's impossible for the Israeli government to engage in a ceasefire. And so if you go back to October 7th and what happened, and you compare that, let's say, to the United States, it would be the equivalent of 50,000 people dying in the United States and several thousand people taken as hostages. So the proportionate response that the Israelis took, I know many people are outraged by it, but I just ask you to think about it and empathize with them in terms of what happened. They were attacked, and they have to defend their country, and they have to go get their hostages. So until that's resolved, I don't see that as a geopolitical risk. However, I do see it as a risk for the Israelis because they were on the doorstep of normalizing with the Saudis. And so now unfortunately, that attack played into the hands of exactly what the Iranians wanted, was to create tension between the Saudis and the Israelis. But when that is resolved, I do predict that they will reconnect because it's in the strategic advantage.
Back to the status quo ante before what happened.
Yeah, they'll go back to that status, but they'll eventually normalize with Israel because the stakes are too high. The Sunni relationship with the Israelis was improving. And it just makes geopolitical sense for them long term. So despite what happened, I do believe that this will normalize once the hostage situation is resolved. On the Ukrainian situation, I think it's a different situation entirely. It's really going to be dependent upon the U.S. election. The United States with Joe Biden is still engaged in the post-World War II architecture and in the belief in NATO and the support of our NATO allies. And just to remind everybody, in 1994, the Ukrainian government had the 6th largest nuclear arsenal. And President Clinton, who has spoken at our conference many times, always brings up that he negotiated with the Ukrainian government the removal of those nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees. And so we need to, if we really want to stay committed to the global alliances and to peace and freedom, we need to maintain that cause. So despite all the disinformation in the United States and despite some of the hard-right Republicans, I think it's very, very important for the United States to maintain these alliances and to reject totalitarianism coming from Russia. And I'll just point out to everybody here, this is the cradle of democracy. 5.7 billion people in this world are living under some form of autocracy or dictatorship. And so it's very, very important for the United States to reject this alongside of our European allies. So if Joe Biden loses the election, I predict that he won't, but if he loses the election, that whole ecosystem is at risk, and then you'll see lots of geopolitical instability, and it will affect the markets.
I think Donald Trump said that if he gets elected before he gets into the Oval Office, the war would end. Do you sense that he has these kind of capabilities?
No, he doesn't have that kind of capability. And what he has said publicly, what he has said privately, that he would like to end the NATO relationship. Obviously, there are people that will technically say that he can't end that relationship without a vote in the Congress, particularly in the Senate. But I would encourage people in this room to Google Project 2025. There's a 900-page document. President Trump's team is way more organized now than they were in 16 or 2020, and they have a 900-page document. Go through the document and see what they want to do, and he'll use executive powers to effectively dismantle NATO. And I think people in this room know this, but it's worth repeating. The 101st Airborne, which is probably the strongest fighting force for the U.S. since the Second World War, 20 years of fighting experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, are in Poland for a reason. Moreover, the Finnish government, the Swedish government, 80 years of NATO, neither of those governments wanted to be part of NATO, but they want to be part of NATO now. So don't underestimate the threat that's coming from the East, and that threat needs to be rejected with a coordinated alliance. So the way he would stop the war is by ceding the territory to Vladimir Putin. He's made it very clear that he wants to be in that axis of autocracy. He praises Putin, he praises Orban, he praises the kid that runs the North Korean government. And, it's insulting to the West, and it's insulting to the cause of freedom.
Thanks, Antony. So, Paschalis, we've seen a backlash on ESG in the U.S. and a shift of the discussion in Europe from transition to renewables to energy security. Are sustainable investments still relevant, you think?
I think your observation is very accurate. But, the politics of sustainability are the politics of sustainability. What remains true is that sustainability, broadly defined, is one of the biggest investment opportunities of our generation. There is a massive reallocation of capital towards the rewiring of the energy systems. Electrification is a big theme, as in use of electricity as opposed to fuel-based energy sources. Decarbonization is a big theme, as in using less CO2 in the power generation. There are opportunities in batteries and storage, opportunities around the abatement of CO2 or the capture of CO2, opportunities in renewable building materials, the food production system. There is a lot of investment opportunity out there. And of course, let's not forget that no matter what we do in order to transition to greener sources, we need mitigation. We need climate resilience investments. This country experienced in the last couple of summers wildfires and floods that it has never seen before. So we need to literally fortify coastal areas. We need to make more resilient areas that are at risk of floods. We need to redo a lot of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, energy infrastructure, our building stock. And let's not forget that we're only a boat ride away from areas that might be very impacted by climate change in the coming years. And I'm talking about the Middle East and Africa. Greece and Europe cannot afford waves of climate refugees. So it's the responsibility also of Europe and both the public and the private sector, in fact, to invest in more resilient climate infrastructure for the people that are likely to be very impacted in the coming decades. So there is a lot of money to be spent and invested on the sustainability theme still.
Usman, we talked a little bit about your outlook on Greece. Let's talk a little bit, taking into account the geopolitics, your investment outlook for, the region, Southeastern Europe.
So, like my friend just said, I think there's extreme weather is becoming a real risk globally. So there's a lot to be done there in terms of infrastructure development and so on. So that's an opportunity, not only in Greece, but for the broader part of Europe and the rest of the world, infrastructure development. I think there is a lot of traction on digitization, on the digital economy. AI is becoming real, more and more so, right? It's going to become part of our daily lives. I don't think we understand the relevance of it or the extent of the relevance of it just yet. So there's huge potential there. Overall, I think there's a lot that Greece has done over the past 3-4 years relative to the rest of Europe and in an absolute sense as well. But infrastructure, digitization are two key themes that I think will continue to grow.
Thank you, Usman. I'm going back to Paschalis. I've asked him, I've listened to him talking about AI, and it's, of course, one of the major topics today. From an investment standpoint, is AI for the NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Googles of the world, and for large countries only, or how can we, put AI investments in a mid-sized country like Greece so that they are relevant?
I think they're relevant for everybody. Of course, the emphasis and the focus here and the, ChatGPT and the rest of LLMs, I guess, or large language models have captured the imagination of people. And many very important cash-rich, very resourceful companies look at AI as an existential matter. And this is why you see all the spending from the big companies. But, we're just starting imagining the applications, right? We're just scratching the surfaces, literally. So there is a lot of application work that needs to be done, and this is pervasive across industries. Some of the most important beneficiaries of AI actually are not going to be in the tech industry. It's going to be in, healthcare and biotechnology and government and energy even. And these are relevant for any country. Greece comes to the AI, let's say, theme with some advantages. Let's not forget that not only AI, but also Web3, disruptive digital technologies are human capital intensive businesses, and Greece has a well-educated workforce and a very important scientific diaspora, which has not been utilized as much as it could. And I'm talking about the great scientists and academics, but also business people we have in the US and throughout Europe and other places. It's an era of digital nomads. Greece can be totally a destination for digital nomads. We've seen some of it during COVID and right after COVID. And it's an era of an uncharted territory, and God knows that we know very well to navigate uncharted territories as Greeks, and we have strong entrepreneurs, and I can totally see Greece becoming a startup nation.
Thank you. Let's keep that optimistic sound. Antony, you talked a lot about the project 2025, and I'll log into it after we finish. But you mentioned that his team might have ideas of dismantling NATO, but you've also written about him, you know him, you said that he's an existential threat to democracy. What is he capable of if he gets elected
If you,
the next
if you go
4 years?
if you go through the list, he is a big believer in something called unitary executive power, and the people that put together his transition team have said publicly that they want a post-constitutional America. And so to really understand what made the country great is the decentralized nature of the government, where there's really no central authority of power. And what we learn from power is that human beings aren't good at handling power. And so when you get authoritarian regimes, you always get kleptocracy and you get very high levels of corruption. So the United States, we have to avoid that at all costs. And he talks about that openly with his team. But you know, the good news is they're making a lot of mistakes, and one of the critical mistakes that they made is on women's rights issues in the United States. So whatever your feelings are about this issue, most people in the United States want women to have a right to choose, and most people support IVF as a strategy for creating families. You have 14 states in the United States now that will no longer allow you to have an abortion. And this cost the Republicans in the 2022 midterm elections, and it's going to cost them again here in 2024. But listen, he's talking openly, getting rid of NATO, liquidating the judicial and legislative branch of the government. Again, go to his transition team 900-page statement. I'm not making it up. He's talking about the deportation of 15 million people. So that would require armed guards and armed vehicles like in The Handmaid's Tale, driving around the United States, pulling people out of homes. I don't think the United States is set up for that. I don't think the United States actually wants that. The problem is that the current president, is very old, and he shows old. He's 81 years old. He's not 81 years young. But I think the United States has had a general tendency to reelect incumbents that are doing a decent job, and he's onshored manufacturing. He's building microprocessor foundries again in the United States, and he's got a very robust infrastructure bill that's revitalizing the bridges, roads, and tunnels. So a lot of this stuff is not being portrayed properly by his administration because he can't get to a microphone like that and talk anymore. And he broke his foot about 3 months ago and refused to wear the boot, result of which he can't put weight on his right foot. So when you see him walking, 81 looks like 91. But I still think he beats Trump.
Okay. Another optimistic side in this panel. Gregory, the last question. We're bringing from global to local this discussion. What state is the concession of Kalamata Airport at?
Yeah, we have also some concessions we run. One is Kalamata Airport. Kalamata, we have already 4 interested qualified parties. We expect now in the very soon to issue the final version of the document that they will bid for, and to get financial offers. And anyway, I have by the end of the year the company that will actually take over Kalamata Airport and make it like the other airports that we have seen, the 14 that are now at Fraport. At the same time, we're looking to do the same with the other 22 smaller regional airports, which will be very important for revitalizing and giving better services, but also bringing more people to other islands and other places in Greece, so we can distribute more evenly the tourism that we are lucky to have. And this is also something that follows. It follows yesterday's announcement that we absorb at Growthfund TAIPED, the privatization agency. Actually, Paschalis was at some point heading it, and HFSF for our banking system, which is in our in the way that we look at it and we're designing it, it's going to be very helpful because we will have extra capacity to run concessions and all the things that we need to do in a much more better and efficient way that will bring better results for all of us. And especially now that the time as Antony says, since he's optimistic about the inflation and the global economy, it's a window of opportunity for us, given also that the rest of the geopolitics will be the ones that we want. It's a great opportunity for us for the next, this period, to do our best, utilize all our internal forces at Growthfund and overall to achieve the best result and bounce Greek back even stronger.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take all the optimism we can from this panel. Thank you very much, Gregory, Antony, Paschalis, and Usman
Nice
for
to
this
meet
nice
you.
talk. Thank you all for listening.